There is nothing more frustrating than finally seeing a pattern. Perfectionism, people pleasing, identity fueled burnout, seeing this pattern, knowing it's a problem, genuinely wanting something different, and still not being able to change it. And unfortunately, I constantly see this with high performers. And these people are self aware, they are reflective, they are actually willing to do the work and get honest with themselves. And they have even gotten to the point where they see how their high pressure approach is costing them. They see the stress and this dissatisfaction. And yet, as much as they want to stop running on this never ending treadmill, so to speak, they keep defaulting back to the same pressure driven patterns. And that is when I get the question, okay, so now what? Because people want to change and they don't know how. And that is exactly what this video is about. What actually comes after awareness and why so many smart, capable people get stuck right here. So let's get into it. Hi, I'm Chris. I'm a career and mindset coach. And for the last 9 years, I've worked with driven, capable people who look successful on the outside and yet feel stuck, pressured, or disconnected on the inside. And in the last few videos, we've talked a lot about the pressure that overachievers live in. We talked about how the traits that made you successful can start holding you back, what is driving that, and the different ways that pattern can show up in real life. So if you have been watching along and nodding and feeling called out in the best way, I probably do not need to convince you that this is a problem anymore, right? You are likely already ready for change. But here's where things get surprisingly tricky, because most of the people I work with are problem solvers, and they are used to seeing a problem, fixing a problem, and moving on from a problem. And so naturally, they try to approach this whole I'm making myself miserable epiphany in the same kind of way. They think to themselves, well, I overextend, I'll just start setting boundaries. Or I'm unfulfilled, oh, I'll start doing something more values oriented. I push myself too hard, I'll care less. And sometimes these things work for a little while, but eventually, maybe a few days later, maybe a few months later, these people find themselves back in the same patterns, overcommitting, people pleasing, holding themselves to impossible standards. And that is usually where the story starts to turn inwards. So they start thinking to themselves, oh, maybe I'm not ready for change. Or maybe this is just how I am. Maybe change isn't actually possible for me. And here is the part that I want you to hear so clearly. That cycle does not mean that you are failing at growth. All it means is that you are trying to change inside of the system that taught you these patterns in the first place. Pause that. Write it down, burn it into your memory. You are trying to change inside of the system that taught you these things. And that is why awareness is great. It helps you see these patterns, but it doesn't actually help you change them because it hasn't changed the system underneath the patterns. And at a high level, the system I'm referring to is this invisible set of rules that you've been living by consciously or subconsciously. These are rules about what's good and bad in the world, what makes you valuable, what happens if you slow down or mess up. And these are the bigger identity beliefs that we've been touching on in the last couple of videos, but I want you to think of them less like individual thoughts and more like an ecosystem that you are living inside. And so when you change a behavior, the ecosystem that it's living on will push back if you have not changed at the ecosystem level, because the rest of the system is not on board with this change. Think about it like trying to run a new app on an old operating system. You can have the new thing installed, but the infrastructure doesn't support it, and therein lies the problem. And the same is true for us. You can't change what you do without changing why you do it, and that is why until the system changes, nothing sticks. But how the heck do I change the system? You might be thinking to yourself. So let me show you. So true change, like I said, requires a process that works on the same level where the problem actually lives. And that is why I built what I call the Achievers Reset framework for the people I work with. This framework is built off of my own experience going through an existential crisis in my mid-20s and everything I've worked with clients on for almost a decade. It takes all the pieces that we learned need to happen and in what order and pulls them together into a process that you can actually follow. And it's 5 steps, and I'm going to explain them here. Now, a little bit of context first. I am going to give you the overall map here, but I'm not giving you a set of instructions. I'm not saying, step 1, here are the 5 things you need to do. If you want to learn more about the details of each of the steps and how we actually implement things, you can head to the workshop. I will drop it in the description. But consider this more of your orientation video of how this all fits together, so you can start to understand the steps and how they coexist and why they matter. So with that said, let's get into the framework. So the first step in the framework is seeing the system that you are inside. I call it challenging your overachiever focus. Many of you have started to do that by watching these videos, but I cannot stress the importance of this enough. Because for many of the people I work with, as much as they know that this is really high pressure, very stressful, not particularly great for them, the way they are operating, they can see it and yet they can still kind of think that it's beneficial. because in some ways, again, it has gotten them to where they are. But we have to look at the real costs, right? Not to judge it, but just to truly see what this approach has been costing us so that we can then get into actually changing it. And this first step is essential because it lays the groundwork so that later when you say, oh, Dee, yeah, this isn't so fun. Maybe I don't want to do this. You can come back to this reminder of, hey, remember why we're here? Yeah, those are the reasons. Step 2 is about reprogramming your mindset. And this is where we work on the actual pressure itself, those beliefs and that internal messaging that we talked about before. We work on identifying what those unhealthy beliefs are, rewriting them, and helping you actually shift the way you think, rewiring your mindset. Because this, like I said, is kind of that engine that keeps pulling you back in, even when you know better. And so this is, I would argue, the most important step of our work together, reprogramming our mindset by identifying our head trash, working through it, reframing our beliefs, so that we can have that foundation and that ecosystem that can then do all of the other things. Once you've gone through step 2, we move on to step 3. And step 3 is all about rediscovering your whole self. And this is where once that pressure that you've been feeling starts to actually ease, you can start to hear yourself again. So this is where we start to tap into what are your wants? What are your preferences? What are your values? We help you come back to yourself. Because unfortunately, like I've shared, a lot of the people I work with are so out of touch with that because they've been looking externally for all of these years. And now that we've silenced some of that external noise, they can start saying, okay, what is this person? What do they want? And that is very fun. Step 4 is all about decentering your career. And this is where we do the work to ensure your career is not the center of your whole universe, just a single planet within it. We talk about both how to do more of the stuff we do like, but almost more importantly, how to do less of the stuff we don't and to be comfortable doing less so that we can start to decenter and have a healthier, more balanced approach. And then step 5 is all about designing your more fulfilling life. And this is where we work on building a life that's sustainable, not perfect, but just truly something you can hold and exist with. And each of the phases and steps solves a different problem, and they all build upon each other. And so that is why order really matters here. A lot of people try to start at the end. They try to say like, oh, let's redesign my life, or oh, let's start doing things differently and decentering my career, or oh, let's figure out who I am and what I want. But if they do not start at the beginning, and if they do not, 1, get buy-in that this actually needs to change, and 2, reprogram the mindset, none of these other things are going to stay. If they try to make the changes before they've changed the system that is running all of these things in the background, nothing sticks. And that is why so much of this work isn't just about willpower, but it is also about sequencing and process, which again is why I created this as a framework that you can actually follow, because it makes it more palatable and it makes it more doable and it does things in the right order. So in the videos over the next few weeks, we are going to start unpacking these phases, especially the pressure and mindset work in step 2, because that is where most people really struggle. But if you want me to walk you through all of the 5 steps in a more structured way, that is exactly what the free workshop is for, to take you through the 101. So no pressure, no rush, but truly, I will drop the link in the description if you want to go there when you're ready. So if this video put into words what you have been feeling for a long time, if you have tried to make changes and they haven't stuck, or you're ready to make changes and it just feels daunting, take a breath. I see you. You are not broken. You are not incapable of change. You just might not have the right tools or the right process. And I am so glad you're here now so that you do. So thanks for coming, and I'll see you next week. Bye, friends.